There's an English phrase that is translated. It comes across in the English as this: obey the voice of Jehovah. Obey the voice, or if you're reading an English translation, a lot of times it'll say, obey the voice of the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, which is the divine name. So obey the voice of Jehovah. This particular phrase occurs 30 times precisely. That phrase occurs 30 times in the Tanakh. In the Torah, it only occurs in the book of Deuteronomy. It does not occur at all in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, or Numbers. But 11 times in Deuteronomy, it shows up. Now, I put just a list here. Joshua has it 1 time. 1 Samuel has it 4 times. 1 Kings and 2 Kings have it 1 time each, the phrase, obey the voice of Jehovah. Jeremiah, 9 times. Psalms once, and the book of Daniel once. So this particular phrase, I find very interesting. And I find it even more interesting that Deuteronomy and Jeremiah really use this phrase over and over and over. It's so important. It's very critical of the religious establishment of his day. In fact, in Jeremiah chapter 7, if you read verses 21 through 23, one of the things it says is that God never commanded the children of Israel on the day that they left Egypt to sacrifice. But what he did want them to do was obey the voice of Jehovah. Now think about that. So what does that mean? I mean, this is an important point. So this phrase in Deuteronomy, I'm going to quickly go through this. This phrase, the English thereof is obey the voice of Jehovah. This phrase in Deuteronomy indicates that it is an essential element of the true faith. Would you agree? I mean, you would think to obey God's voice is essential. Now, if you can get into, well, I don't hear his voice, that's another question altogether. But if you did, right, it's essential in the faith. If you do obey, there are certain things that take place. So I'll give you an example. I'm just going to run through these quickly. We're not going to read them. I will give you the references, though. In Deuteronomy, these are the 11. In Deuteronomy 13:19, it says that Jehovah will be merciful to you and multiply you as he swore unto your fathers, if you obey the voice of Jehovah. In chapter 15 and verse 5 of Deuteronomy, this is an incredible passage, it says that there will be no poor among you. Imagine that. Now the same passage, by the way, Deuteronomy 15, says that there'll always be poor among you. But it does say that if you obey the voice of Jehovah, there'll be no poor among you. Now that either means a couple of things. One of the things it can mean is that Moses is saying, well, you won't obey the voice. So think about that. Read Deuteronomy 15. Very powerful. All right. Another thing is that in chapter 26 and verse 14, there is a declarative oath basically that's made before Jehovah after the third tithe, right? This isn't like the tithe that some people talk about, but this is the 3rd year tithe. There is a declarative statement that is made that includes this statement that the person offering will say, I have obeyed the voice of Jehovah. According to chapter 28, verse 1, in 28, this has the blessings, the consequences, both positive and negative, for people following God's ways, basically. In 28:1, it says that people who obey, the Israelites that obey the voice of Jehovah will be set on high, high above all the nations of the earth. Verse 2 says that blessings will come upon you and overtake you. I like that. The idea is that the blessings will literally chase you down and take you down. Now, if I were a good preacher, I'd say, how many of you can say amen? You'd like some blessings to chase you down and tackle you. That's basically what that means. And then in chapter 30, my favorite chapter probably in all the Bible, in verses 8 and in verse 10, it indicates that ultimately, as part of the restoration, people will obey the voice of Jehovah. Now, let me add something else about this. If not, in other words, if you don't obey the voice of Jehovah, guess what's going to chase you down and overtake you? The curses. According to Deuteronomy chapter 28. The same description is given for the curses, if you will, that are given for the blessings. Interesting. And then in that's chapter 28, verse 45, where it says that. And then in verse 62, it says that you'll be left few in number if you don't obey the voice. Now, how many of you are familiar with this verse in 1 Samuel? In 1 Samuel 15, this is just a lead-in. 1 Samuel chapter 15, I just want to read verse 22. You probably know this by heart. Good Bible students that you are. And Samuel said, has Jehovah as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of Jehovah? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Obey. So would everyone agree thus far with me as my lead-in that to obey is very important? Now, the problem with everything that I just covered is that we're reading English. Because obey could lead you astray. What does obey mean in English? We're talking English. Whenever I read the word obey, I think of what that means to me in English. It means basically to comply with a command, right? To do what you're told. If I work for Mark and Mark gives me an assignment and says, go clean the office, if I go clean the office, I have obeyed that order, that command. It involves an action in response to a request, you see, and you think, well, surely that's what these texts imply. We're going to talk about that. I want you to go with me. Now, some of you probably already know where I'm going, but stay with me and don't give it away if you already know, because this is going to build. See, it's part of the excitement in the class, if you will. So go with me to Exodus chapter 19, the book of Exodus, Shemot 19. This is where I started this past week on my study, and I want to read verses 5 and 6, Exodus chapter 19, verse 5. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, this is Jehovah speaking, and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own special treasure from among all the people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. Now this is interesting. According to the English, we're going to get to the Hebrew in a minute, but according to the English, if you obey Jehovah and keep his covenant, then the result of that, the benefit of that is that you're going to be a special treasure, a segulah, the Hebrew says. And you're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. All right? Now look at verse 8. And all the people answered together. Imagine, all of them answered together, and this is what they said. All that Jehovah has spoken, we will do. Now, from where you're sitting, give a golf clap. Yay, Israel's going to do what God said for them to do. And therefore, they have obeyed, if they do this, according to our current understanding of the phrase. So they said they're going to do it. How many of you have kids? All right. Go to chapter 24, please. Exodus chapter 24. Normally, I would read larger sections to give you the context, but I just want to hit a couple of points here. Verse 3, Exodus 24, verse 3. And Moses came and told the people all the words of Jehovah and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice. Here we go again. And said, all the words which Jehovah has said, we will do. Man, we are on a roll here. This is twice that the children of Israel, God's special chosen people, have said, we're going to do it. We are going to do it. Now look down at verse 7, chapter 24. And he, Moses, took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Jehovah has said, we will do and we will hear. Now look, now we're getting somewhere extra special. Because now, not only have the people of Israel said they're going to do it, according to the rabbis and the great sages, there is a lot made of this. They think that this is so great because they're going to do it and then hear it. Can you imagine what it takes to be so obedient that you would agree to do before you even listen? And this is put forward as a great testimony of the faith of the children of Israel throughout the generations. That they have said they will do it no matter what it is. Has anybody else read the Bible? Is that what happened? It sounds beautiful. It sounds so great. It sounds so noble. Two things need clarification. First, the word obey in every passage that I just read to you, without exception. I'm reading from the Koran English. Other translations translate these differently. But in every passage that I read you, the Hebrew word there is Shema. You know what Shema means? It means listen. It means to hear, to hearken. Shema. Shema. So if somebody says, I'm going to do it before I even listen. See, if you think of obey, meaning that I'm going to comply with a command, it's almost, if you think about it rightly, if you read it according to what the translation actually says, I need you to listen. You ever had somebody, you're going to tell them to do something, and they're saying, I'm going to do it. And you're like, hey, hang on. I want you to listen first. I want you to listen to the instructions, because you're going to get ahead and you're going to mess it up. Listen first. We're going to get to you doing what I tell you to do after I tell you what to do. You know, it's one thing for people to say, oh, I'm going to do it. But just hang on. Second, to do, and this is the point I made, but I want to stress it. To do something before listening, to even say that you're going to do it before you hear it, sounds noble, sounds good, sounds righteous, sounds holy, sounds whatever. It didn't work then. It will not work now. Always, always listen first. Arguably, the most well-known passage, at least in the Torah, if not all of biblical literature, is called the Shema. Shema. Hear, O Israel. You know this passage, Deuteronomy 6:4. Well, Deuteronomy, I read a scholar's work who said that Deuteronomy uses the word Shema, forms of the Hebrew Shema, some 80 times. So here's what started. This is what kind of nerd I am at this kind of stuff. I don't know if it's 80. I just know that this person who's a brilliant scholar said it's 80. So I counted. I came up with 92. 92 times a form of the Hebrew Shema is used in Deuteronomy alone. Now, to me, that says that one of the main points in Deuteronomy and Devarim is listen. Now remember, they're on the verge, they're on the lip of the land, they're about to go into the promised land, and Deuteronomy is presented as a series of talks by Moses. I think if you set out to read it, it would be, continuously. It would take a couple hours, but this is presented as the final word before you go into the land, and Moses does one thing. He needs you to listen. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 5, it says, among other things, that what Moses set forward to do was to make the teaching plain. Make it plain so that you could understand it. Put handles on it so you could do it. But you got to listen first. So it has to be important. So years ago, I began a study of every occurrence of Shema. Every occurrence of Shema. There is no reason in my understanding to translate Shema any other way. In other words, obey, I don't think that's the word that needs to be used there. I'll just say it like that because of what I know obey means in our language and in our culture. There's no reason for it to be translated any other way than a form of listening. Hear, you could say hear, hearken, listen, but it has to do with paying attention. And if you're talking physically, it has to do with the ears, okay? It's that faculty of listening, that sense of taking in sound and processing it. Now, I noticed in this study that when I did the study on the word Shema, and I looked at every occurrence in every form in the book of Deuteronomy, I started noticing something. I started noticing that rarely did Shema show up by itself. It was generally accompanied by other words. At times, the word Shema would occur with a second word. The second word is a form of a word which means to learn. In Hebrew, it's lamad. In various forms, it's used often in association with the word Shema. It can mean to teach, to learn, to instruct, this idea. Translations vary. But it has to do with learning. Has to do with learning. But it's translated variously. So I want you to, the way that I'm translating these forms is the way that I did it for the class. So Shema is to hear or listen. The word lamad, I'm giving a broad definition, which means to learn. In other words, you can learn you and learn other people. Teach. If you're teaching someone, you're causing them to learn. You see the connection. So sometimes the word learn is associated. At times, another word is associated with listen, and that is to guard. To guard. In Hebrew, the word is shamar. And sometimes this translation or that translation will render it a different way. I think most commonly, the word shamar is probably translated keep. Keep. But what does keep mean in our language? See, a lot of times you think, well, that's mine, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to hold it. But at its root meaning, it means to keep it safe, to hold it safely, right? But in a better definition, I think, of this word shamar is to guard. We're going to talk about these as we work through. But at times, the word shamar is translated keep, is sometimes translated be careful, sometimes it's translated observe. You see, have you ever looked up a Hebrew word in a concordance or whatever, like a Strong's? I started with Strong's years ago. And it would say, here's the word, and it can mean, and it'll give you 12 different words, and you're like, I don't understand. I mean, why does it mean all of those things? So I'm looking for one word to capture the meaning. Now, I know there are people out there that say, oh, the Hebrew is so rich and so full that it takes so many words to express it, and you can't express it. I've heard lectures on this. Look, guard is what the word means. Guard. Now, there are times, moving on, that there is yet another word that's associated in Deuteronomy with Shema. And this word is do. In Hebrew, the word asa. If you study Hebrew vocabulary, you'll see that asa can mean to do or to make, and it literally means to do. To do. But at times, this word is translated keep. So if you're looking at the English, you won't recognize the connection that I'm going to lay out, but I'm going to give you every verse. I think I am. But I want you to, we're going to go through these because I want you to hear what I have to say. So at times, Shema is associated with 1, 2, 3, or all of these words. And they are in a certain order. They're in a certain order, which indicates to me, because of the consistency thereof, that God is trying to show us something in terms of the path that we need to take to achieve the do it phase. In fact, it's not just, I want to tell people, no, don't just do it. I want you to listen. I want you to learn. I want you to guard. Then you can do it. That doesn't mean you can't try and live a righteous life. It's not what I'm saying. But I want to lay out a pattern here, a pattern of holiness, a path to righteousness, if you will. Earlier, when I mentioned in Exodus chapter 24, verse 7, where the children of Israel says, we will do and we will hear. And I said, as good as that sounds, it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. Deuteronomy, 19 times has the word listen and do in the same passage. 19 times. Guess what? Without exception, listen comes before do. I think that's a valid point. You know, if I would have said, hey, there are 2 occurrences in Deuteronomy that say listen first before do, you'd say, well, that's 2 witnesses. If I said there were 3, you'd say, wow, 3. 19, no exception. Listen, do. Both actions are important, but so is the order. Now follow me through Deuteronomy. I'm going to go through these passages, and you can take notes, or you can wait for our good, faithful friend to take his notes. Good morning, Baruch. So Deuteronomy, I'm just going to start in chapter 4, verse 1. Now you have to be careful because the English will sometimes throw you. Now this is my translation in the Koran. Now therefore, hearken, you get that? O Israel, to the statutes and to the judgments which I teach you, to do them, that you may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers gives you. In this case, 3 of the words are used. Listen, learn, and do. Notice guard isn't mentioned in that particular passage. But you have listen, hearken, you have learn, I'm going to teach you, and then you have do. And you go, well, you left out guard. As I said, some of these verses, some of these statements only have one or they at least have 2, but then often it will emphasize it in the next verse, such as I'm fixing to show you. Does that make sense to everybody when I say fixing to? See, that's an idiom. Maybe some of you are not from here. I should say, I'm about to show you. Okay, verse 2. You shall not add to the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish from it, that you may, English, keep the commandments of Jehovah your God, which I command you. I want to stress this for a moment. Where I say keep, in Hebrew, that's shamar. The root word is shamar. It means to guard. He says, I don't want you to add to God's words, nor do I want you to take away from, so that you can keep the commandment. No, so you can guard them. See, people talk about keep the commandments. What are you doing today, Ross? Well, I'm keeping Shabbat. You're keeping it. What does that mean? Well, and people try to explain it. Guard. The idea is to guard the commandments. So what is it to guard it? Think of a guard standing here and somebody says, hey, I'd like to add some words to Jehovah's word. Nope, you can't do that. I'd like to take some, nope. See, that's guarding. That's what was commanded. Did it happen? We'll talk about that later. The point is, to guard is to not allow people to add to or take away from. Absolutely no argument. That's what it means. Clearly, in the Hebrew, that's what it means. Now, go with me, just to make this point a little bit more, go with me to Deuteronomy 13:1. Now, in English, I think it's chapter 12, verse 32, but you'll find it. Every matter which I command you, observe to do it, you shall not add thereto or diminish from it. Now, and it emphasizes again, how do you do that? You don't add to or take away from. Now, I'm going to say something here that a lot of people may not have recognized, but it's something I like to bring up in this particular subject whenever I teach on it. If we go back to the very first sin, it involves a violation of what I'm telling you right now. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, I'm paraphrasing, God tells Adam, you can eat of all the trees in the garden, you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad you shall not eat from it, for in the day that you eat thereof, dying, mut tamut, dying, you shall surely die. That's Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. So Adam is given the command, you can eat from everything, but don't eat from this, because if you do, don't eat. That's the rule. So later, when the Nakash, translated serpent, approaches Eve, and he says, hath God said that you shall not eat from every... And what does she say? He said, she's quoting, she's talking about God, he said, we can eat of every tree, but this tree, the knowledge of good and bad, we cannot eat from it, nor touch it, lest we die. God didn't say they couldn't touch it. I've got I've been in trouble for saying this before, but according to the strict letter of the law, they could have licked that fruit as long as they didn't eat it. Now, I'm not making fun. I'm being literal. I want you to get the literalness here. He said, don't eat it. So, but they thinking, you know what? Let's just not even go close to the tree. And they begin to build a fence around it. Because it makes sense. If I don't touch it, then I'm less likely to eat it, because you cannot eat without touching. You know, because you could say, well, I touched it with my lips or whatever. So you start to be, but that's the point is they've added to the command. And it set them up, for the fall. I'm using fall loosely, not theologically. So, put in your notes Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 6. In this particular line of thinking, because according to Proverbs 36, chapter 30, verse 6, I'm going to go ahead and read that to you. Proverbs 30, verse 6 says, add not to his words, lest he reprove thee, and thou be found to be a liar. Right? Don't do it. To guard, it's one thing to listen. Like I have people listen all the time. But we're working towards doing. So in order to do, we need people to learn to listen. They need to learn everything about what they just heard. They need to guard, don't add to or take away, and then they do. See, a lot of people do, but by the time they do, they've added to and taken away from, and it's not even recognizable. Many have made the commandments so difficult that people can't even do them. They've created burdens that are heavy to bear, that they can't even lift with the finger. See, once you make the commandment, you stack so much on it, you couldn't see the commandment. It's not even within sight anymore. It's a burden then. Because people failed to listen. They didn't learn, though they think they're teachers. They certainly didn't guard. But boy, they're going to tell you how to do it. How many religious people are truly guarding? I mean, think about it. How many have failed in their watch? I believe that this is perhaps the oldest and greatest sin. No, let me say it this way. This is the oldest and greatest sin, and it is put forward by none other than those who have been entrusted with these teachings. Go look at it. Chapter 4, Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Jehovah my God commanded me, that you should act accordingly in the land whither you go to possess it. I have taught. There's our verb learn. All right. So why does he teach them that? That you should act accordingly. In the Hebrew, it's do. Learn, do. See the order? Consistent. Now look at verse 6. Keep them, therefore, and do them, for this is your wisdom and understanding in the sight of the nations, who will hear these statutes and say, surely this nation is a wise and understanding people. For the nations of the world to look at Israel and say, surely this is a wise and understanding people, they will have been introduced to something through their hearing. Did you notice? the process starts again with hearing among the nations. Now, what are they going to hear? It goes back to verse 6. Keep them and do them. In other words, when Israel guards and does, then the nations will hear. And the process begins again. Chapter 4, verse 10. The day that you stood before Jehovah your God in Horeb, when Jehovah said to me, gather the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. Listen and learn. Gather them together so that they can hear and learn, and then that learning is put forward. Same verb. So it's hear, learn, learn. Listen, learn, learn. You see how the verbs are in order? The idea is that it follows this pattern throughout. Look at verse 14. We're just rolling through these. And Jehovah commanded me, chapter 4, verse 14, at that time to teach you statutes and judgment, that you might do them in the land in which you are to go over to possess it. Teach, do, or learn, do. See the order? Go to chapter 5, verse 1. Chapter 5, verse 1. Moses called all Israel and said to them, hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that you may learn them and keep and do them. Listen, learn, guard, do, all in one passage. Chapter 5, verse 1. Look down at verse 23. Listen for these verbs. Listen. You listening? Chapter 5, verse 23. For who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of fires we haven't lived? Go thou near and hear all that Jehovah your God shall say. Speak to us all that Jehovah our God shall speak to you. Now these are the people. And we will hear it and do it. And Jehovah heard the voice of your words when you spoke to me. And Jehovah said, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they've spoken to you. They have very well said all that they have spoken. Oh, that there were such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep my commandments, all my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Go say to them, return again to your tents. But as for you, stand here by me, and I will speak to thee all the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which you shall teach them, that they may do them in the land which I gave them to possess. You shall observe to do therefore as Jehovah your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. Chapter 6, verse 1. Now this is a commandment, the statutes and the judgments which Jehovah your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land into which you go over to possess. Now a lot of people know, so there we got learn and do. Now everyone knows Deuteronomy 6:4, right? That's the Shema, Hear, O Israel. But again, what I'm interested in is the fact that we are so instructed in tradition that we learn verses here and there, but we don't know context. We don't study. You know, it's nice. I'm not saying it's not nice to know Shema Yisrael, and so I'm not saying that's a beautiful verse to memorize. But look at 6:3. This is important too, right? Hear, Israel, therefore, and take care to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily as Jehovah, God of your fathers, has promised you, in the land that flows with milk and honey. Listen. Take care. What do you think that is in the Hebrew? How about guard? So we've got listen, guard, and do. Where it says take care, in Hebrew, that's guard. Now, why didn't they translate it guard? I don't know. Take care. I tell people that when they leave the house or whatever. Take care. Doesn't mean the same as, hey, be guarded. Or I don't think of it that way. I just mean, I'll see you next time. Take care. See, that the idea is the language can be very consistent and demonstrate and illustrate a very, very important point. This particular passage, listen, guard, and do. Why would you think that's important? That it'll be well with you. If you listen, guard, and do, it's going to be well with you, right? Doesn't mean bad things don't happen to good people. Generally, this is a rule that's stated very clearly, though. Look at chapter 7. We're going to keep rolling through here. Chapter 7, verse 11. You shall therefore keep the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which I command you this day to do them. Guard, do. That's what the Hebrew says. Look at verse 12. Wherefore it will come to pass, if you hearken to these judgments and keep and do them. So if you listen, learn, and do, if you listen, guard, and do, that Jehovah will keep unto you the covenant and the truth which he swore to your fathers. He'll love you, bless you, multiply you, bless the fruit of the womb, fruit of the land, fat corn, wine, oil. You see that? That's pretty powerful. If you listen, guard, and do them, this is what he tells Israel, the corporate group. This is what they get. Look down at chapter 11. 11, verse 32. You shall observe to do, Hebrew, you shall guard to do all the statutes and judgments which I set before you this day. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall guard to do in the land. Guard to do. I want to stress, I want to go through this. I'm just going to hit a few more. 13, chapter 13, verse 19. He has sworn to your fathers when you shall listen to the voice of Jehovah your God to guard all his commandments which I command you this day, to do that which is right in the eyes of Jehovah your God. Listen, guard, do. Go to 15, Deuteronomy 15. Excuse me. Verse 5. And the English says, only if thou carefully hearken to the voice of Jehovah your God, to observe to do all these commandments which I command thee this day. For Jehovah your God blesses you as he promised you, and you shall not lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall lend to many nations, but shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they will not reign over you. But look, that is if you shmoah tishma, where it says carefully hearken. In Hebrew, the word is repeated. If you listen, yes, listen. So the English, it's a way of giving the superlative in the Hebrew. So what you do is you repeat it. James Tabor brings this out in the English translation that he's worked on. It's the idea of this repetitive. So how do you translate it? Most translations add something like diligently or carefully hearken. If you listen, yes, listen. All right. Then to guard, to do all these commandments, then the following things happen. All right. Look down at chapter 16, verse 12. 16, verse 12. And you shall remember that you were a bondman in Egypt. You were a servant in Egypt. Therefore, you shall guard to do these statutes. Because you were a servant. In other words, how many times in the Hebrew Bible, especially in the Torah, does it say, you were a servant and therefore, right? So the reason that you guard and do these, you were a servant, and ultimately, we read this a few moments ago, the other nations will look at Israel and say, what a wise and understanding people this is. Why? Because they guard to do the commandments. Interesting. It's a connection. Chapter 17, verse 10. Which they of that place, which Jehovah shall choose, shall tell you, and you shall observe to do, guard to do, according to all that they inform you, according to the sentence of the Torah, which they shall teach you. In context, this is talking about when the religious leaders are teaching you to guard to do them, that's what you should do. Now, the problem is if the religious teachers aren't guarding and are not teaching you to guard to do, that's where we get into the problems. And that's exactly what's happened. Tragically, that's what's happened. Now, look at chapter 17, verse 18 and 19. This is talking about the monarch. In other words, when you go into the land, God tells them ahead of time, you're going to ask for a king like the nations. Now, a lot of people love the whole monarchy story. The monarchy is a departure from God's rule and reign. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, Samuel cries to God and he says, the people have asked for a king, and God says, basically, don't cry. They're not rejecting you. They've rejected me from being a king over them. But that's another class, right? But the idea, though, is that when you do have a king, let me show you, if you're going to have a king, because you're going to want one like the nations, these are some of the rules. And I like to summarize them. You can't have a lot of women, a lot of horses, a lot of money. What's the use in being a king, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of takes all the fun out. Well, this king is not supposed to be exalted above his brothers. I mean, what's the use in being king? You ever hear the phrase, it's good to be king? No. Now, most of them did, even the righteous ones. They had plenty of women, they had plenty of money, because they're not following this. Had they followed it, it would have been a better deal. Let me show you an example. Let's just look at verse 18. And it will be let me back up. And it shall be when he sits upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this instruction in a book out of that which is before the priests, the Levites, and it will be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life. Think about that. Now, some people say it means the whole Torah, the Genesis through Deuteronomy. I don't believe that because of the Hebrew phrase, which is something I'm working on, literally says HaTorah Hazot. So I have an indication in my study, which means the Torah, this Torah. Something very specific. It doesn't mean Genesis 1, the king doesn't have to write the whole Torah, right? I know people are like, yes, he does. It says in whatever. Okay, another point. Now, but look what it's for. And it will be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life. Why? That he may learn to fear Jehovah his God, to guard all the words of this instruction and these statutes, and to do them. Learn, guard, do. Think about that. Now listen, you know what that achieves for us, for him, for us, for anybody? That his heart be not lifted up above his brothers, and that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. Wow. It works for the king. It works for the poor. It could ultimately bring about a world in which there is no poor among us. Imagine that. But that involves listening, learning, guarding, and doing. Chapter 26. verse 14. Now this is the oath when a person is making an end of tithing all the tithes in the third year. I mentioned it earlier, but listen to this. This is what the person would say when they appear, as the Torah says, before Jehovah. Verse 14, I have not eaten of it in my mourning, neither have I consumed any part of it when unclean, nor given of it for the dead. But I have hearkened to the voice of Jehovah my God, and have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look down from your holy habitation from heaven, and bless your people Israel in the land which thou hast given us, as you did swear to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So this person comes forward and they said, I have listened and I have done. Chapter 26, verse 16. This day Jehovah your God has commanded you to do these statutes and judgments. Therefore you shall guard and do them. How much so? With all your heart and with all your soul. Guard and do. Rolling right through these. Chapter 27, verse 10. You shall therefore obey. What do you think obey is? You shall therefore obey, which is listen to the voice of Jehovah your God, and do his commandments and his statutes which I command you this day. So a lot of people will say, well, I don't have to do the commandments. You don't. You don't have to listen. You don't have to learn. You don't have to guard, and you don't have to do. Now, the results aren't good. I mean, the end result of your refusal to listen, learn, guard, and do, we've already talked about. It says the curses will chase you down and overtake you. You'll be left few in number. Read chapter 28 of Deuteronomy. The latter part, it's pretty hectic, pretty bad. In fact, flip over to 28:1. We'll go through a couple more and we'll be closing this down. 28:1, and it shall come to pass if you will hearken diligently, basically if you listen, listen, to the voice of Jehovah your God, to guard and do all his commandments, which I command you this day, that Jehovah your God will set you on high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come on you and overtake you if you shall hearken to the voice of Jehovah your God. And then it goes on. Look down at verse 13. We'll just skip down. And Jehovah shall make you the head and not the tail, and you shall be above only, you shall not be beneath. Make Israel great again. Get a hat. If you hearken to the commandments of Jehovah your God, which I command you this day, to guard and do them, and you shall not go aside from any of the words which I command you this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. Pretty clear, right? And just one reminder, verse 45 of chapter 28. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you and shall pursue you and overtake you till you be destroyed, because you would not listen to the voice of Jehovah your God to guard his commandments and his statutes which he commanded you, and so forth and so on. Pretty plain, right? You listen, learn, guard, and do. If you don't, it's not good. All right, chapter 29. Is everybody, now I know I'm going through a lot of verses, which I always do anyway, but I want you to get this order because it's very essential for people to understand. I think it's important. Look at chapter 29, verse 8. 29, verse 8. Guard therefore the words of this covenant and do them, that you may prosper in all that you do. I love that. If you don't guard it, meaning you add to or take away from, you're not going to prosper. This is true. The key, Dave and I titled one of the classes, we discussed the title. I taught it, but Dave and I came up, The True Keys to Biblical Prosperity. Remember that, Dave? You know, these prosperity preachers about you can be rich and you can do this and you can do that. The real prosperity comes when you guard and do the covenant. You may be poor, doesn't matter. We're not talking about financial here. Now, if that happens, great. Didn't happen to me, so I can't preach that gospel. I mean, if I had a jet, might be different, but I don't. I don't think I will. All right. Now look down quickly at chapter, I'm going to tell you to go to chapter 30 and verse 8. You shall return, this is a promise, and obey, hear the voice of Jehovah, and do all his commandments which I command you this day. This is a promise. Verse 10, if you will listen to the voice of Jehovah your God to guard his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the Torah, and if you turn to Jehovah your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Order is consistent. Please look at verse 11. For this commandment which I command you this day is not hidden from you. It's not too difficult, neither is it far off. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to us, for us, to heaven and bring it to us, that we may, notice the order, hear it and do it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near to you. It's in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. Let me tell you who has this word in their mouth and their heart. Those who listen, learn, and guard. That's who this is talking about. In context, this is dealing with the times of restoration. Very clear. Now go to chapter 31, verse 10. 31, verse 10. At the end of every 7 years, in the time of the year of release, in the feast of booths, Sukkot, when all Israel is to come to appear before Jehovah your God in the place he will choose, you shall read this Torah before all Israel in their hearing. Now I want you to listen to why. Why would you read HaTorah Hazot, this Torah, in their hearing? What's it going to do? Listen, verse 12, gather the people together, men, women, children, stranger that is within your gates. But wait a minute. What if they're not an Israelite? What if they're a stranger in the gate? What if they, God forbid, want to keep the Sabbath or keep the dietary rules or something? That they may hear and they may learn and fear Jehovah your God and guard to do all the words of this Torah. All the words of this Torah. And that their children who have not known anything may listen and learn to fear Jehovah your God as long as you live in the land, whether you go over the Jordan to possess it. Very interesting. The learning process, and this listen, learn, guard, and do, if followed, will lead to the nations hearing about what a wonderful people, wise and understanding people this is. The problem is that the nation who's supposed to guard this word, who's supposed to bring it to the other nations, have not guarded, and in some ways, often, well, the only way I can think to describe it is they've not gone in the kingdom and they've taken the keys and locked others out too. We have teachers who are telling people of the nations, that's not yours, it's mine. Can't keep Shabbat, don't even try. By this logic, you could ultimately say, and some have, that it's not important for a non-Jew to honor their father and their mother, or, it's okay to trip a blind person because those commandments were given to Israel. No, the ultimate goal is that you will be a light unto the nations, a covenant of the people, that the world will hear of these righteous rules and statutes and judgments and begin to want to say, we will go with you, for God is with you. We have heard that God is with you. We've got a lot of work to do. Ultimately, the world needs to follow the same pattern. Listen to the voice of Jehovah, to the statutes and the judgments. Listen in order to learn. Torah is indeed a learning process. Jehovah taught it to Moses. Moses taught, and through this Torah teaches us. We are to learn, and we are to cause others to learn. I would not want to be a person who discouraged someone from learning Torah. And look, I know a lot of people say it's too hard, you have to have a special teacher. No, you don't. Sorry, you don't. Now, it would be foolish not to consult brilliant minds, the sages and scholars that have gone before us. But you can do that. You can read, you can study, you can learn Hebrew. Learning is very important, but you better guard. Guard. Don't add to or take away from. Be guardful of those who do add to and take away from. Hear me. If there are those who've added to the commandments or taken from, be guardful. Be careful. It may seem good and right what some have done by adding to. Might be pleasing to the eye. Desirous to be wise. But it could lead to trouble. It's a trap. And you and them may very well be found out to be a liar. And do. Yes, by all means, do the teaching. But listen to the instructions first. Learn them and guard them. This is truly how one does the teaching. Shabbat Shalom.